I lost my job today. The words hung in our kitchen like smoke from a burnt dinner. Samantha's hand froze halfway to her wine glass, her engagement ring catching the overhead light, the same ring I'd spent 3 months' salary on 8 years ago. Her eyes didn't fill with concern. They didn't soften with sympathy. Instead, they hardened into something I'd never seen before, like watching water freeze in real time. "What do you mean you lost your job?" Her voice was ice cracking under pressure. The signs had been accumulating like compound interest, small percentages that seemed negligible until you calculated the total. Samantha had quit her PR job 3 months after the wedding, claiming she wanted to focus on building our life together. The charity committees she joined all had membership fees that exceeded most people's annual salaries. The personal trainer, the nutritionist, the stylist, necessary investments in our image, she'd said. She'd developed a peculiar habit of introducing me at parties. "This is Harry, Senior VP at Whitmore Capital. Never just my husband, Harry." At the country club, she'd position us near the membership board members, steering conversations toward market projections I'd share over bourbon. Later, I'd learned she'd been trading on my insights, feeding them to her sister's boyfriend who ran a small hedge fund. There was the credit card she'd opened in both our names without telling me, discovered only when American Express called to congratulate me on qualifying for their black card, based on our exceptional spending patterns, $60,000 in 3 months. When confronted, she'd cried beautifully, like an actress who'd studied method. The purchases were for us, she insisted. The jewelry would appreciate, the handbags were investments, the spa treatments were preventative health care. She'd befriended the wives of my colleagues with surgical precision. Linda Chen, whose husband ran the Asian Markets Division. Patricia Morse, married to the head of compliance. Never the associates' wives, never the junior partners, only the women whose husbands could influence my career trajectory. Our dinner parties were chess matches, each invitation calculated for maximum strategic value. The fertility issue had been her masterstroke. 2 years ago, she'd tearfully revealed her desperation for children, scheduling consultations with the best specialists in Manhattan. But there was always a reason to postpone. A vacation that couldn't be rescheduled, a charity gala that required her full attention, her mother's manufactured health scare. I'd started noticing her birth control pills hidden behind her skincare in the bathroom cabinet, though she'd sworn she'd stopped taking them. Last month, I'd overheard her on the phone with her sister. 5 more years, she'd said, 10 million in assets, then I'll consider it. A baby locks you in for 18 years, but money is forever. Every interaction became a transaction. Sex on nights before important presentations, affection when bonuses were announced, distance when quarterly reports disappointed. She trained me like a portfolio manager conditions algorithms, rewarding performance with intimacy, punishing volatility with withdrawal. What Samantha didn't know was that I had been promoted twice in the last year, not once. The first promotion she'd celebrated with champagne and a shopping spree at Bergdorf's. The second, to senior managing director, I'd kept hidden, having the additional compensation diverted to a separate account at a different bank, an account that had been growing by $40,000 a month for the past 8 months. She also didn't know about the recording app on my phone, initially downloaded to capture meeting notes. Legal in New York as long as one party consents, my lawyer friend had mentioned casually over drinks. I'd started using it during our conversations about finances, about the future, about the children she claimed to want so desperately. Most importantly, she didn't know about the forensic accountant I'd hired through my firm's security division, discreet, thorough, and familiar with marital asset investigations. His preliminary report had revealed a pattern of transfers from our joint accounts to one registered under her maiden name. Small amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there, but consistent. Over 3 years, she'd siphoned nearly $200,000. The Hamptons house offer had been the trigger for my test. She'd pushed hard for it, a $4 million property we'd viewed last month. "Interest rates will only go up," she'd argued. "And Harrison just made partner at Goldman. His wife mentioned they're looking in the same area. We need to move now or we'll be priced out of the right neighborhood." But I'd seen the emails she thought she'd deleted, correspondence with a realtor about the commission structure if she brought the buyer, me, to the table. She'd been setting up to collect both sides, the buyer's agent commission flowing to an LLC registered in Delaware under her sister's name. The chief investment officer position would come with a $15 million signing bonus and a compensation package that would triple my current earnings. The announcement was scheduled for Monday, 5 days away. But tonight, Tuesday, I decided to test the foundation of my marriage with 4 simple words that weren't even true. My phone was recording when I told her about the fake job loss. It was still recording when she'd gone upstairs to call her sister. And thanks to the Bluetooth speakers I'd installed in our bedroom last month, supposedly for her meditation app, I could hear every word through the app on my tablet. I stood in the kitchen, tablet in hand, watching the audio wavelengths spike on the recording app as Samantha's voice carried through the Bluetooth speakers. She'd closed the bedroom door, but technology made privacy an illusion in our own home. The conversation with Jessica started with confirmation that I'd lost my job, but quickly evolved into something far more sinister. Samantha revealed she'd been documenting our marriage for 3 years. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every client dinner. Building a case for emotional abandonment, her lawyer had confirmed it was enough, especially combined with my sudden unemployment, to establish financial instability. The first twist hit like a margin call I hadn't seen coming. She explained her timeline with cold precision, filing in December, before Goldman's January bonuses, courts calculating support based on my past 3 years of 7-figure earnings, not my current unemployment. The prenup that expired at year 10 still had 2 years left, but with changed circumstances, she could force a renegotiation or threaten to leave while I was vulnerable. Jessica questioned the strategy, but Samantha's response revealed the depth of her preparation. 8 years of perfect documentation, the fertility treatments establishing emotional distress, the charity work, positioning her as a community pillar who'd sacrificed her career, the credit cards and spending patterns establishing a marital standard of living that I'd encouraged. Every move calculated, every receipt saved, every conversation twisted into evidence. Then came the second twist. I've been seeing someone. My hand gripped the tablet so hard the screen protested with a warning about pressure sensitivity. Richard Brennan, the pharmaceutical executive from the charity gala, worth twice my salary, divorce finalizing next month, already offering to set her up during proceedings. She dismissed my potential suspicions with cruel accuracy. My schedule, office by 5, home by 9, unconscious by 10, had given her complete freedom. The affair had been happening in plain sight while I'd been building the wealth she was planning to steal. The recording continued capturing her admissions, the meetings with divorce attorneys, the apartment viewings she'd already scheduled, the systematic transfer of our social connections to position herself as the victim of a workaholic husband who'd lost his edge and his job. But the most revealing moment came when she laughed about my probable reaction downstairs, calculating burn rates, obsessing over the money. She understood numbers, but had never grasped that the real betrayal wasn't financial. It was discovering that every moment of our marriage had been a transaction, every kiss an investment, every I love you a hedge against future returns. I set the tablet down and opened my laptop, fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. The Bluetooth speakers continued streaming their conversation as I logged into our shared cloud storage, something Samantha had insisted on for transparency when we'd merged our finances after the wedding. She'd been careless, or maybe just arrogant. The folder labeled medical records contained more than IVF consultations. Screenshots of text messages with Richard Brennan dated back 6 months, photos from lunches at the Carlyle when she'd told me she was at Pilates, hotel receipts from the St. Regis on days I'd been in Chicago or Boston for client meetings. The best part, Samantha was telling her sister, is that I've been using the credit card Harry never checks, the one for household expenses. Every dinner with Richard, every hotel room, Harry technically paid for. I pulled up our credit card statements, cross-referencing dates. There it was. March 15th, St. Regis, $500, the same day I'd been presenting to the pension fund in Detroit. April 3rd, dinner at Daniel, $300, when I'd thought she was at her book club. May 22nd, Bergdorf's lingerie department, $1,200, 2 days before another hotel charge. The recording app captured everything as I methodically documented her admissions. Her lawyer's name, Stephen Walsh, from Walsh & Associates, the same firm that handled hostile takeovers. The offshore account in the Caymans her mother had helped her establish. The apartment viewing she'd scheduled for next week on the Upper East Side, just to have options ready. I opened a new browser window and logged into the investment account she didn't know I had access to. She'd saved the password on our shared computer. 25 trades in the last year, all based on information she'd gleaned from my work conversations. Insider trading was a federal crime, carrying up to 20 years. She'd been sloppy, trading in her own name, creating a paper trail that led directly back to our dinner table. Harry's probably downstairs calculating our burn rate, Samantha laughed. He thinks money is everything. He never understood that money is just the tool. The real asset is knowing when to cash out. I pulled up the embryonic LLC documents from the Delaware Secretary of State website. 3 companies, all registered in the last 18 months. One for real estate commissions, one for consulting fees, one simply listed as investment holdings, all with Jessica as the registered agent, Samantha as the silent beneficiary. The fertility clinic records were the cruelest discovery. She'd been prescribed birth control pills through the same clinic that was supposedly treating our infertility. The doctor's notes were damning. Patient requests contraception while maintaining appearance of fertility treatment for marital reasons. 6 months of evidence downloaded in 15 minutes. Every confession she made to her sister, another nail in the coffin of her plan. The next morning, I left for work at my usual time, kissing Samantha's forehead while she pretended to sleep. The performance had begun. At the office, I closed my door and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Michael Thornton, my college roommate who'd become one of Manhattan's most ruthless divorce attorneys. The second was to the SEC whistleblower hotline. The third was to my firm's head of security. Michael reviewed the evidence that afternoon in his office overlooking Central Park. He listened to the recordings without expression, examined the financial documents with clinical precision, and finally leaned back in his chair with the satisfied look of a chess player seeing checkmate 5 moves ahead. His strategy was surgical. File for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial fraud. Freeze the assets before she could move them. Report the insider trading to protect myself from complicity. The prenup she thought expired at 10 years had a clause she'd never read carefully. Infidelity voided the expiration date. 8 years or 80. Cheating meant she left with what she brought, $40,000 in student loans and a used Volkswagen. The head of security at Whitmore Capital took a different approach. Corporate espionage, he explained, even by a spouse, threatened the firm's integrity. They'd conduct their own investigation, ensure no client information had been compromised, and cooperate fully with any SEC investigation. My promotion would be delayed pending clearance, but my cooperation would be noted. I spent the next 3 days maintaining the charade of unemployment, leaving the house in gym clothes instead of suits, returning with coffee instead of deal sheets. Samantha's sympathy came in calculated doses, always followed by suggestions about downsizing, about being practical, about her taking a more active role in managing our reduced finances. She scheduled meetings with realtors about listing our brownstone, set appointments with financial advisors about liquidating investments, even contacted a headhunter about returning to work, her sacrifice for our survival, she said. Each move was documented, recorded, added to the growing file Michael was assembling. The private investigator Michael recommended worked quickly. Richard Brennan wasn't just married, his divorce had been called off. His wife had no idea about Samantha. The investigator captured them entering the St. Regis on Thursday afternoon, photographed the champagne delivery to room 1247, documented their emergence 3 hours later. Brennan's hand on the small of Samantha's back, her head tilted toward him in a way I remembered from our early days. Friday night, Samantha made her move. She presented me with a folder of financial documents, a survival plan she'd been working on. It involved transferring the house to her name to protect it from potential creditors, moving our liquid assets to accounts she'd manage, and giving her power of attorney to handle any legal issues, while I focused on finding work. I signed every document she put in front of me. each signature another piece of evidence of her attempted fraud. Saturday morning arrived gray and humid. Manhattan's October, wearing summer's funeral clothes. Samantha left early for what she called a yoga workshop in Tribeca. The GPS tracker the investigator had placed on her Range Rover showed a different destination, Richard Brennan's apartment on the Upper West Side. I followed an hour later, taking the subway instead of driving. The doorman at Brennan's building was reading a newspaper, uninterested in the foot traffic. The service entrance was propped open for weekend deliveries. I took the service elevator to the 12th floor, the investigator's floor plans memorized. Brennan's apartment door was thick enough to muffle sound but not eliminate it. I stood in the hallway, phone recording as Samantha's laugh floated through, genuine in a way it hadn't been with me in years. The investigator had been thorough. Brennan's wife was in East Hampton for the weekend. The prenup Samantha thought protected her actually contained a morality clause that would devastate any settlement. The pharmaceutical executive she was betting her future on was leveraged beyond sustainability. His wealth, a facade maintained by creative accounting and his wife's family money. The second twist revealed itself through their conversation, barely audible but unmistakable. Samantha wasn't the only one running a con. Brennan was using her for information about Whitmore Capital's pharmaceutical portfolio. Every pillow talk confession about my work had been feeding his insider trading scheme. She was a mark thinking she was the grifter, a perfect reversal I couldn't have scripted better. I documented everything with timestamps and location data. The security footage from the building's hallway cameras would corroborate my presence, my witnessing of her deception. But more importantly, I now had proof that she'd been compromising not just our marriage, but my firm's confidential information. Corporate espionage charges would make divorce proceedings look like a parking ticket. That evening, Samantha returned home glowing with the particular satisfaction of a secret well kept. She'd brought Thai food from our favorite place, playing the supportive wife nursing her unemployed husband's ego. Over pad Thai and false sympathy, she mentioned that Jessica had found a job opportunity for me in Boston. Lower salary but good potential. We could sell the brownstone, start fresh somewhere cheaper. The recording app captured her entire pitch. The job was real. I'd already verified it. A position at a firm Jessica's boyfriend controlled, where I'd be under their influence. My earnings monitored, my career trajectory managed. They'd planned this contingency, a backup if the divorce fell through, control through employment rather than alimony. I agreed to consider it, even thanked her for thinking of solutions. Let her believe she was still 3 moves ahead while I held the entire board. Sunday evening, I gave Samantha exactly what she wanted to hear. Sitting in our living room with the Manhattan skyline glittering behind her, I told her I'd decided to take the Boston job. Her eyes lit up with barely concealed triumph. The relief transformed her face into something almost loving. She curled against me on the couch, fingers tracing patterns on my chest, playing the devoted wife one last time. She started planning aloud, how we'd decorate a new place, how the slower pace might be good for starting a family, how this setback might actually strengthen our marriage. Her performance was flawless, Oscar-worthy, completely wasted. I poured her favorite wine, a Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion. She raised her glass in a toast to new beginnings, unaware that Michael Thornton would be filing papers in 12 hours, that the SEC had already frozen the accounts connected to her trading activity, that Richard Brennan's wife had received an anonymous package of photographs that afternoon. She fell asleep against my shoulder during the movie she'd chosen, something about second chances and redemption. I sat in the darkness, her breath warm against my neck, wondering if there had ever been a moment when she'd actually loved me, or if I'd simply been a business plan with a pulse from the very beginning. Tomorrow, she'd wake up to find me gone to my imaginary job search. Instead, I'd be at Whitmore Capital, accepting my promotion and signing the documents that would systematically dismantle every scheme she'd put in motion. But tonight, I let her sleep peacefully in her victory, dreaming of the money she'd never touch and the future that had already evaporated. Monday morning arrived with surgical precision. I left the house at 5 a.m. while Samantha slept, but instead of the gym, I went to Whitmore Capital. The promotion ceremony was brief and private. The board had been informed of the situation, appreciated my discretion, and expedited the process. By 6 a.m., I was chief investment officer with full authority over my accounts and a security team investigating every trade Samantha had made using privileged information. At 9 a.m., Michael Thornton filed for divorce in New York Supreme Court. Simultaneously, the assets were frozen by court order. Samantha's credit cards declined when she tried to buy her morning coffee. The joint accounts she'd been planning to drain showed a balance of zero. Everything moved to escrow pending investigation. At 10 a.m., the SEC arrived at our brownstone with a warrant. I watched from my office security feed as Samantha answered the door in her silk robe, confusion morphing into panic as they explained the insider trading investigation. They confiscated her laptop, her phone, the designer handbags that held her hidden flash drives. At noon, Richard Brennan's wife called Samantha. The investigator had recorded this call, too. Brennan's wife calmly informing her that not only was the divorce back on, but she'd be named in the proceedings. Alienation of affection, conspiracy to commit fraud. The Brennan family lawyers would ensure Samantha never saw a penny from anyone. By 2 p.m., Jessica was in custody for her role in the illegal trades. The FBI had been watching her boyfriend's hedge fund for months. Samantha's sloppy trail had given them the final pieces they needed. The dominoes fell in perfect sequence, each person scrambling to save themselves by providing evidence against the others. At 4 p.m., Samantha received the email from her lawyer. Stephen Walsh had withdrawn from representation due to conflict of interest. Whitmore Capital was a major client. Every top divorce attorney in Manhattan had been retained or conflicted out by morning. She'd have to find someone in Brooklyn, maybe Queens, definitely not someone from her social circle. The brownstone locksmith arrived at 5 p.m., changing every lock while Samantha was at the police station. Her belongings, the clothes, the jewelry, the handbags, would be inventoried and held as potential evidence. The doorman had instructions. She was no longer a resident. 6 months later, Samantha's world had compressed to a studio apartment in Queens and a public defender named Larry. The SEC investigation had uncovered 17 counts of insider trading. Her mother's Cayman account had been seized by federal authorities. The combined legal fees from the criminal case, the divorce proceedings, and the civil suit from Brennan's wife had consumed the $200,000 she'd hidden. Jessica had turned state's evidence, providing detailed testimony about her sister's schemes in exchange for probation. The recordings from their phone calls became public record during the trial. Samantha's charity circle friends discovered she'd been gossiping about their marriages, their finances, their prescription drug habits, all captured in the evidence discovery. The invitations stopped, the phone calls ended. Her Instagram followers dropped from 12,000 to 300. Richard Brennan had fled to Switzerland, leaving Samantha to face the charges alone. His wife had successfully sued for damages, winning a judgment that would follow Samantha for the next 20 years. The pharmaceutical executive she'd gambled her future on was now just another name on a federal indictment. The designer clothes had been auctioned to pay legal fees, the Range Rover repossessed, the engagement ring she'd treasured, appraised during the divorce at $40,000, had been sold for restitution to Whitmore Capital's affected clients. She'd kept the wedding band, pawning it last week for grocery money. The New York Post had run the story on page 6. Trophy wife's inside trading scheme collapses. Her LinkedIn profile, once boasting connections to Manhattan's financial elite, now showed a position as a receptionist at a dental office in Astoria. 35 years old, newly divorced, with a federal conviction pending. The life she'd architected with such precision had become a cautionary tale shared at cocktail parties she'd never again attend. The chief investment officer position had exceeded even my expectations. The signing bonus alone had purchased a penthouse in Tribeca. Cash, no mortgage, no one else's name on the deed. The view stretched from the Hudson to the East River, a Manhattan panorama I'd earned without manipulation or schemes, just 15 years of genuine work. Whitmore Capital had spun the entire situation into a triumph of corporate security. My handling of the insider trading discovery had become a Harvard Business School case study in ethical leadership. The board had accelerated my equity vesting schedule as recognition. I was 39 years old and worth more than Samantha had dreamed of stealing. The loneliness she'd warned me about never materialized. Free from her calculated social climbing, I discovered actual friendships among my colleagues. Weekly poker games replaced charity galas. Genuine conversations replaced networking performances. My parents visited monthly now, comfortable in my space in a way they'd never been in the brownstone's manufactured elegance. I'd started dating Catherine, a federal prosecutor I'd met during the SEC investigation. She laughed at my bad jokes, cooked elaborate Sunday dinners, and had read my financial disclosures with professional thoroughness before our first date. No surprises, no schemes, no recording apps necessary. Just two people building something real on foundations that wouldn't crumble under scrutiny. The IVF clinic had called last month, asking about the embryos Samantha and I had frozen during her performance of desperation. I'd had them destroyed. Some futures were better left uncreated. The $40,000 check I received from insurance felt like closing a corrupted file, clearing space for something authentic. My reputation had transformed from another Wall Street executive to someone who'd survived a sophisticated attack with integrity intact. The story circulated through Manhattan's financial district, a modern parable about due diligence applying to marriages as much as mergers. Standing in my office 40 floors above Manhattan, I sometimes think about that night in our kitchen when I told Samantha I'd lost my job. The lie that revealed the truth. She'd been right about one thing. Money wasn't everything. It was just the tool that exposed who we really were underneath the performance. The prenup she'd never read carefully, the recordings she never knew existed, the promotion she never saw coming. 3 moves ahead, she'd thought, while playing a game that had already ended. Marriage, I'd learned, was like the markets. The most dangerous losses came from people who confused speculation with investment, who mistook leverage for love. I kept one photo from our marriage, the one from our wedding where her father had pulled me aside with his bourbon-breathed warning. Framed on my desk, it serves as a reminder. When someone shows you who they are, through the cracks in their smile, through the calculations in their eyes, through the ice in their voice when they think you're losing value, believe them. The first time.